just last week, I signed a budget that took it a step further. It said if you want some of those forms of assistance, we want to be able to show that you can actually pass a drug test, because we know if you can do that, you can find a job. So to me, the key with those sorts of things is states are ready to be innovative. And every state's different. Iowa, Wisconsin, although we're all in the Midwest, but Iowa and Wisconsin are probably more alike than we are with Illinois and some of their challenges. And so I look at that and say, why not send the money and the resources back to the states and allow the state and local governments to work together in a way that will help, in a way that's specific to a state as opposed to a one-size-fits-all mentality across the country. Sure.
Steve West, Hiawatha. Just a comment.
You got a microphone.
I'm a Bear fan, and my daughter and son-in-law are Viking fans, but we'll vote for you.
Well, see, I'll kid you with this. Dare I say I might lose a vote for saying this, but my favorite tweet, I do all this Twitter and that now, was the Sunday after my last election. So last year, third time in 4 years I won. The Packers played the Bears. Sunday night football, Lambeau Field. The boys and tonight were with me. We had a great time. Aaron Rodgers, I know I'm digging this in here, but Aaron Rodgers threw 6 touchdowns in the first half. Jay Cutler completely fell apart. And my favorite tweet was, I said, it's official. It was my third election in 4 years. I said, it's official now. I now have more victories in Wisconsin than Jay Cutler. So sorry so hot.
Governor, what is your thinking about the need to reform programs like Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid?
No, great question. I think overall, and I think it fits into both reform and growth, because going forward we need to have leadership, big bold ideas on reform, on growth, and on safety. Safety being more about national security, which I'll answer some questions on, I assume, here shortly as well. But on reform, big chunk of the three, I take Medicaid for starters and send it completely back to the states. As a governor, I know, talking to Governor Branstad and other governors, including Democrat governors, we are much better equipped, and we are eager as governors to take responsibility for Medicaid and spend it at the state level in a way that fits the needs, the unique needs of people in our state. And right now, we've got maintenance of effort requirements and other things. You see it in and out of Obamacare and some other challenges out there. But I think states could do a much more effective job of providing the kind of care needed for Medicaid, but doing so in a way that kept those costs under control, unlike what the federal government's have. For Social Security, I want to tell you, for any of you who are retired or near retirement, I'm not going to touch your Social Security. That has been a sacred promise made by the federal government to each of you as you prepared throughout your career, as you prepared for retirement. But for my generation, for people in my generation and younger, we're going to have to make some reforms. We're going to have to make some changes. And in the coming months, we just announced on Monday, so we're going to try each month to come out with a series of different reforms on different subjects. Probably going into the fall, we'll go into greater detail on what those sorts of reforms would be for my generation and younger. But we're going to have to do that, not just for the future, but to make sure we can support those individuals at retirement age or near retirement age today. And that's going to be a key part of our plan.
Thank you. Hi, thank you for being here today, and thank you for planning a tour of this beautiful state. I'm sure you'll see while touring that there are a lot of wind turbines here in Iowa. In fact, it supports 7,000 jobs. You've said in the past that, like Governor Bush, you support a phase-out of the production tax credit. Is that still your opinion, and why?
Yes, and I think in the end, if you level the playing field for all forms of energy, we're better off long-term. And so I think, you've done the same sort of thing in this state and other states when it came to the ethanol, in terms of the tax benefits to ethanol. That has been phased out over time. When it comes to a lot of these areas, it's about market access, I know, with ethanol and other areas. But I think over time, when it comes to all different forms of energy, I want to level the playing field so everybody can compete. I want to be on the same levels and allow the market to drive things so that as consumers, we can choose the best route and the best opportunity possible. Sorry, I called in somebody right now. Yeah, making it hot. Not needing any more incentive to sweat, right?
Thank you for being here and welcome to Iowa. I have a question on what is your stand on HUD's new fairer affordable housing, And in connection with that, what can be done about the overreach of these bureaucracies like the EPA and the HUD and the Bureau of Land Management?
Yeah, overall, and it's why in the larger context, and not just specific to what you're talking about, but in the larger context, I mentioned Medicaid, transportation, workforce development, even education, but I'd include areas like the EPA. You know, there's, in all 50 states, there are equivalents of the Environmental Protection Agency. In my state, it's called the Department of Natural Resources. Every state has a different name. But to me, I'd send, again, dollars and responsibilities back to the states. I think in many of those areas, you still leave a limited function for maybe mediating interstate issues, so where a river goes through multiple states or a land base goes through multiple sites, there's a way to mediate that between the states, but largely allow the people to make the rules who actually live in those states and those communities, so they balance the need for both protecting our natural resources, which is important. I'm an Eagle Scout. I was taught your campsite should be cleaner when you leave than when you found it. So I want clean air, clean land, clean water. I think most of us do, particularly anybody who's in farming knows you live off the land, so you want a good land base. But you got to balance that with a stable economy as well. And right now the federal government is completely out of whack when it comes to that. We need to put some balance back in life again. And to me, the more you send power back to Des Moines, to Madison, to Springfield, to other state houses, the better off we'll be.
I'm concerned with the treatment of our military, the exodus of a lot of top brass who've been given their pink slips, and maybe a possible litmus test that I've been reading about, whether people are willing to disarm American citizens. I've lived in a country that's been very restrictive, socialistic for several years. I don't like our country becoming a police state and the military to use to do it. How would you respond to beef up our military again and to keep this from happening? Thank you, Dr. Walker.
Well, and I'm going to answer not only that, but expand a little bit, because it really ties into national security and our interest over there, because I believe in my lifetime, the best president on foreign policy and national security was a governor from California. Under his leadership, under President Reagan's leadership, we not only revealed our military, we stood up for our allies, we stood up to our enemies, and as I've said repeatedly now, without apology, we stood for strong American values. People forget, because it was so many years ago, that led to one of the most peaceful times in modern American history. So if you want peace, you don't get it by backing away, you get it by being strong. That's one of the mistakes. To your question, under the Obama-Clinton doctrine, America is leading from behind. That has us pulling back, not just our military, but our policies overall. And again, I'll give you some examples of this. I mean, we've got a president who literally drew a line in the sand and allowed people to cross it. He called ISIS the JV squad. He's called Yemen a success story. He now says Iran is a place we could do business with. But by the way, I still remember as a kid, my brother and I tying yellow ribbons around the tree in front of our house during the 444 days that Iran held 52 Americans hostage. This is not a country we should be doing business with. And so I look at that, for example, I would terminate that bad deal with Iran right away instead of re-saying what it would be nice to have a leader say, which is our threat, which is radical Islamic terrorism. That's the threat that we face in the world today. It's not something that's good enough to contain. You literally have, like a virus, you have to take it out completely. And there are things that we can do immediately. If we were to lift the political restrictions on the military personnel we already have in Iraq today. People forget this. There are over 3,000 troops in Iraq today. If we would lift the political restrictions, I'll give you a good example. We have people who are trained to be precision spotters, people who could call in airstrikes with absolute precision that would assist our Sunni and Kurd allies in their efforts to reclaim the territory taken by ISIS. That doesn't mean a whole new wave of American troops in there. That means unleashing the power of the American military to help our allies in Iraq do what they need to do to take and reclaim that territory out there. So it's not just about more personnel, it's about lifting restrictions. And then the other part, specific to your question, I believe in balanced budgets. I went from $3.6 billion in the hole that I inherited to balanced budgets in each of the years I've been in office. We created a surplus. Our rainy day fund's 165 times bigger than we took office. My pension's the only one fully funded in the country. I know how to balance budgets. But when it comes to sequester, I'd balance our budget, but I'd lift the sequester because we need, at a minimum, to go back to a defense budget that is at the level recommended by Secretary Gates, because we need to give our men and women in uniform the resources they need to keep us safe. And then, when they return home, we need to give them the quality and timely health care that they deserve.
Someone shared on social media a conversation that you apparently had. I don't know if it was legitimate or not. But basically it talked a little bit about the insider side of the Koch brothers or whatever. But bipartisanship. We seem to be stuck in parochialism and partisanship in Washington and even local here in Cedar Rapids or other parts of the Midwest. How can we get back to neighbors and elected officials working on the common sense problems of our nation? And how, after being governor of Wisconsin and becoming our next president, how would you do that to end the partisanship and parochialism that is really stifling this great country?
Well, I think it's a great question. I take it a step further. As I talk to people across this country, not just the Republican caucus voters or primary voters, but to people in general. What people are frustrated more so than that, and I think it's elevated higher, they're frustrated particularly with Washington not being able to get anything done. The strength of why I was elected, I believe, 3 times in 4 years in a blue state like Wisconsin was not only that I carried 96% of the Republican vote. In fact, there's only one governor in America who got a higher percentage of the Republican vote than I did last time. It's my friend here, Terry Branstad, so I understand that here in Iowa. But at the same time, in my state, that's not enough to win. We carried independent voters by 11, almost a 12-point margin. Why? Because people said, I don't always agree with the governor, but I know where he's coming from, and I know he's going to get the job done. And what people, I think, are hungry for from our leaders in Washington, or the lack of leadership in Washington, they want people who are just going to tell them what they're going to do and then go out and do it. And so this week's a good example. I get asked by these guys in the media all the time about this candidate or that candidate. What do you think about him or her or whomever? And in particular on the Republican side, I said, I'm not going to, that candidate can talk for themselves. I'm going to tell you what I'm for. And I think that's what Americans are hungry for. And then they want someone who's going to go out and do it. Remember after I was elected governor the first time, the media was shocked that in the days after the election I actually started working on the things I was going to do. And they thought, well, politicians normally back away from those things. I said, well, you've not followed me for the 8 years I was in Milwaukee County Executive. Part of the reason why I wanted a county that went 2/3 for Obama was because Democrats and Republicans alike said, this guy actually tells us what he's going to do. In fact, one of the favorite things I did when I first ran for county executive was, again, a county that never elected a Republican before. I put out a card about this big that had all the things I was going to do in my first 30 days and a checkbox next to each one. And I said, put this up on your refrigerator and hold me accountable for it. To this day, years later, I still run into people who tell me they're Democrats who say, I still have your card on my fridge. And I've never stopped voting for you, even though I'm a Democrat, because you're the only politicians who told me what you were going to do and actually did it. I think the best way to move this country forward, and one of the best reasons why I loved President Reagan wasn't because he was a conservative or Republican. I like that too. It was because he was an eternal optimist in the American people. We need a leader who's not going to pit one group of Americans versus another. We need someone who's going to lift up everyone. We have the last question. That's the voice of God. Tell me I've got one more question. Okay, so is there a mic over?
I just want to ask about the IRS. How do you feel about that? I pay people to figure my farm taxes and my other taxes, and I think we should do away with the IRS.
guess, I'm not a big fan of taxes either, not just the IRS. But in our state, I'm proud to say we cut taxes by $2 billion. We cut them on farmers, we cut them on manufacturers, we cut them on individuals, all the rates, and reduced the number of brackets. And this I'm particularly proud of. It's good for a farmer, good for everybody who owns property. We cut property taxes 4 years in a row. In fact, the budget I just signed means that in 2016, property taxes in my state will be lower than they were in December of 2010. I don't think any governor in America can say that. So I'm with you on taxes, but I think it's more than just tax relief, it's tax reform, it's simplifying the code, making it easy for everyone, both, as your question before, part of the economic plan, both for individuals, but also for employers out there. The other part is, and I'll tell you a funny story again on this, some of you have heard me say this before, but sometimes people ask why I focus so much attention on lowering the burden on hardworking taxpayers. And I always tell them the easiest way to remember is you can pass this story on to others, because plenty of other, in fact, I heard Jimmy Fallon was joking about this the other night, but I love this story, so I tell it often. It's a great way to explain why we need to lower the tax burden. Some of you may have heard that Tonette and I, my wife and I, like to shop at a store called Kohl's. And so I've learned over the years, if I'm going to go and buy a shirt at Kohl's, I go to the rack that says it was $29.99, and it's now marked down to $19.99. And then we go up to the cash register, and we pull it out, and I get the, if I remember right, I remember the insert from the Sunday newspaper, the little scratch off that gets me something off. Or maybe if I've been thinking ahead, I get that card, that mail that you get at home if you're a shopper at Kohl's. It gives you 15 or 20, or if you're really lucky, 30% off, right? And we shop at Kohl's here, right? Okay, somebody in New Hampshire yesterday literally gave me, I got too many things in my pocket. She literally gave, and I keep pulling out my ticket for my bag this year. What is it? Oh, there it is. No, that's not it either. I keep pulling a balloon out at a kid's birthday party. A 30% off card. I won't read it off and embarrass her, but so I said, so you need to take that up. If you're lucky, you get a coupon like that. You got it in the mail, 30% off. And then we go up to the cash register, and Tonette usually reaches into her purse. She pulls out some of her Kohl's cash, and next thing you know, they're paying me to buy that shirt, right? So I say, so how does a company like Kohl's, a good Midwestern company, how do they make money? They make money off of volume, right? You see, they could charge you the higher price for that shirt, and if few of you could afford it, they could lower the price, broaden the base, and make more money off of volume. Sir, for your question about the IRS and taxes, I believe in the same thing. That's what I think about with your money, the taxpayers' money. We could have a higher rates, and some of you might be able to afford it, or we could lower the rates, broaden the base, and increase the volume of people participating in the economy. A plan like that worked pretty well a few years ago under a guy by the name of Ronald Reagan. We called that the Laffer curve there. Today, all due respect to my friend Art Laffer, I call it the Kohl's curve, because I think you can keep your money and use it far better than the federal government. Thanks very much for coming out. God bless you. God bless the military. God bless the United States of America.